Speaking of the far-right fascist losers, Michael Knowles is a right-wing commentator on the Daily Wire. And I came across this clip on Twitter of him talking about how condoms are gay. Yeah. Condoms, the thing that help you protect yourself from disease as a man. It helps you prevent pregnancy as both a man and a woman. Nope, it's gay.
Why did Gallup show a 7-point drop in support for same-sex relations of any kind? Because people are beginning to pull on the thread of transing the kids and realizing that because ideas have consequences, bad consequences come from bad ideas. And so they're going all the way back, and forget redefining marriage or whatever. You go all the way back to the beginning of the sexual revolution.
Redefining marriage, which is a construct that does not exist in nature, by the way. Again, marriage is a social construct. That is not something that is undeniably, irrefutably set in stone, concrete. We cannot change this. This is how things are. This is how things should be always, except when we think back to the way that families used to be raised, it was more like communes didn't exist, but we'll just use that word for simplicity's sake. It was more like a commune, a village. That's where the phrase, it takes a village, comes from. Because families, the nuclear family, is actually a relatively new thing in the history of humanity, which is relatively longer than we like to think. But yeah, in the chat, so I don't think Republicans have really figured out where to draw the actual racism line. They're still reeling from Trump era politics. They're still in Trump era politics. What does this is an example. What does a Republican have to do or say before most Republicans would agree that the person is racist? I don't think there's a good answer for that post-Trump. There is none. There is none unless, and I guess we'd have to see, unless there's certain words or one specific word, because that is the key one phrase I think that universally everyone knows is not acceptable to say. Is the N-word, right? So now there are rumors, and this kind of goes back to talking about the Trump era of politics here, but there are rumors, and they have not been released, but there are rumors of tapes of Trump saying it while filming, and other racial epithets, while filming The Apprentice. And the producer refused to release the clips. Now that is alleged. That is hearsay. There are some people who have been on the set and have said that that was what happened. Now, we don't have video of it yet, at least. We probably should have by now, but that is a clear way of saying, hey, like, if this came out, we would have a pretty good gauge of saying, like, well, are they saying he's racist now or not? Now, that's like the one thing. Because you have someone here like Michael Knowles who's talking about transing the kids, and there has been an actual drop. Like, he is right. There has been like about a 7% drop in support for gay marriage. We actually talked about it recently. But that's because of the hyperfixation on trans people, because of the hyperfixation on the LGBTQ plus community. It is because of people like Libs of TikTok, Michael Knowles, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, that hyperfixate on these, and Jordan Peterson, that hyperfixate on these one-off incidents. You'll notice that in my show, and I genuinely do this almost by accident, right? I don't pick out random non-public figures to talk about on the show. I don't talk about individual, like pretty much for the most part, individual shootings. I don't talk about court cases of random individuals, right? Like I didn't really, for the most part, except after the decision came out about the Kyle Rittenhouse case, because there are certain things that we don't know as outsiders. There are certain context in videos that we can't see. I'm going to show you a video. I'm only going to show you because I know one who filmed it. I know where it is because it's in my town. And I know what it's about because it's a public figure. But these people take one-off random things with no context and amplify them. And you'll see, yeah, maybe that person says something crazy. But guess what? That person is some random person that lives in California and they live with their parents. They have no real power, no real influence. They're just a person posting a TikTok, or they're somebody on Reddit, or they're somebody that has like this insular world in a Discord server. But these people blow it up like it's the end of the fucking world. I would never, ever just take some random one-off thing, some random one-off comments, because guess what? You know, I could go on Twitter and I see people were calling me communists on Twitter, random people that I didn't even see the tweet because they didn't tag me. Just random people. Calling me a communist, calling me this, that, and the other thing. I could just highlight them, but no. I focus on public figures because that's an actual political debate. It's an actual engagement on the scenario and the life that we are in. When you pick out random kids, or you pick out a random teacher out of the blue, or you go after a doctor, or as we'll talk about, you go after kids in your community, then that's how you erode trust in basic things like gay marriage. And that's how you lose 7 percentage points in support for it. Because it's a hyperfixation. Now, for all that they're covering about it, the return on investment for them, I'd say, is pretty bad. 7% after what? 3.5, 4 years of saying the same shit. I mean, in 2019, my opponent in the Doylestown Township Supervisor race that I ran against, Nancy Santa Cecilia, who is a white nationalist, she actually said publicly that me and my running mate, were just pandering to the gays when we went to a pride event. There's been the same shit for a very long time. So, let's hear the final. I'll let this play through. We'll hear why condoms are gay.
And you go all the way back to contraception. There were two cases, Eisenstadt and Griswold. First was Griswold in 1965. Then Eisenstadt comes around in 1972, the year before Roe v. Wade. And Griswold finds a right to condoms within a marriage. Where is that in the Constitution? I have no idea. But
that's not how court cases work. That's not how the Supreme Court case works. That is not the basis of any Supreme Court case. Remember that. You do not have to have explicit documentation because, where's the court case about anything that's on the internet? Because the founding fathers must have written about the internet, right? They must have known about it. No, because you have to be a numbskull to think that something has to be exactly enumerated within the Constitution or the Bill of Rights to be deemed constitutional as legislation. The Supreme Court creates law based on cases that are brought before it. That's just a fact. They decide it based on how they want to decide it at the time. Some of them say that they're originalist textualists. Those people only do that in certain cases, like we see with the current Supreme Court, where they only utilize it to promote a far-right interpretation of the Constitution. You can utilize an originalist originalist viewpoint, as Ketanji Brown Jackson did in one of her dissents, but it doesn't matter because they're not looking at it in a genuine light. They have their decision made. They come into it, and that's how they decide. Judges have bias. Newsflash. So he's talking about two cases that talk about the right to contraception, not just condoms, contraception. Because it's also important to note that I believe it was Clarence Thomas, but it could have been Samuel Alito, in the case of Dobbs that overturned Roe versus Wade, they basically said the next thing that we're going to go after is Griswold, which provides the right to contraception, because they don't believe that people, but specifically women, should have autonomy over their body. That is not my opinion. That is a fact. You can go look at the leaked report, because I guess it wasn't the exact decision because they changed some of the wording, but the leaked briefing memo on the Dobbs decision, and they said Griswold is next. Not in that, not exact phrasing, but that was explicitly, that case was brought up. So the case that he's bringing up, he's doing it because he knows that that's what's next on the docket. He knows that they're coming for contraception. I know I said I'd play it through, but this is what I'm saying. It is never, they don't even hide where they're going. We know it. They're going after contraception because they don't believe that you should have control over your own damn body.
Some libs on the court discovered that magically in 1965. But they said, but there is no right to condoms outside of it.
No. They didn't discover it randomly. The advent of birth control came about at the time, and then there were cases about it. That's how that happens. This is how life works. This is why the Constitution is literally a living and breathing document. It has to be. By definition, it has to be. We went from an agricultural society to an industrialized society to a pretty much all online service-based economy. All throughout that time, you could not possibly have a solely originalist interpretation of the Constitution. You just can't. You just could not do it. It's like reading Adam Smith and being like, oh, he has all the answers for what capitalism could be. Or reading Marx and being like, he has all the answers for what communism or Marxism, whatever it could be. No, they're theorists. They're coming up with ideas. The interpretation is up to the time and context in which things are being implemented and understood.
Marriage. Then 7 years later, the court discovers, oh, actually, there was more invisible ink in the Constitution, and actually there is a right to condoms outside of marriage. Okay, maybe you like condoms, maybe you don't like condoms. I don't know where you're going to find that in the Constitution. I think a lot of people are beginning to notice.
I just stopped myself from pausing it there. Sorry.
That the contraceptive mentality is the beginning of the pride mentality. Because the contraceptive mentality divorces sex from the consequences of sex. It introduces a sterile sexual ethic, which is exactly what gave us the pride movement. There's no distinction here. If you can't read between the lines, the conclusion that one draws is that condoms are kind of gay. To put it as bluntly as possible, okay? And it's not a coincidence that female conservative influencers, noticed by NBC News, are beginning to pick up on that.
Wow. You mean it? I mean, this is not a show about sexual education, but I think Michael Knowles and the Daily Wire should probably go get a quick course on sexual education. And yeah, who says the word sterile like that? It's telling because it's about control. It's about coercion. It's about saying that, as a man, of course, we don't have to carry, they don't consider, trans men can possibly, yes, but in their definition of what is a man, which they never ask what is a man, they only ask what is a woman, but that's an interesting dynamic. Their dynamic of just, the average man cannot get pregnant. So the consequences, the accountability, the justification of your actions of having sex, the repercussions that you must be punished by having a baby, which shouldn't be a punishment in their world, right? Like, you would think that the party of family values would want people that want to have a family have kids, not just anybody that might not want to be a parent to have kids. You would think that, but you would be wrong, because it's not about that. It is about religious dogma. It is about control. It is about coercion. It is about saying, I know better than you. It is saying that the patriarchal system that is existed, they believe it should continue to exist, or it should be, reinstated back to what it was in the 1950s. That is what we are dealing with. And he literally said condoms are kind of gay. Now, I gotta be honest. Yes, maybe once or twice in my life have had sex. And yeah, like I use them because that is protecting yourself and it's protecting your partner. It is being smart. This is where sexual education, it's like funny to talk about on a podcast maybe, but like, hey, buddy, like, I don't know what you were doing before you got married, but you might want to wrap it up, buddy. But I mean, he seems like a very happy, seems like a very happy, level-headed guy.